Hi, I'm Dr. Bernard Starr. Today I'm going to talk about who is more likely to take your gun away. When I first started writing about this subject during the Trump administration, I posed the question this way: who is more likely to take your gun away, Donald Trump or Joe Biden? Even my friends laughed at that. It seemed obvious to them and others who I spoke to that it was no contest. Everyone assumes that Democrats want gun control, and Republicans, and particularly the far-right ones, oppose controls, with many fiercely against any controls on gun ownership. But you will be surprised to learn, as I did, that facts, not opinions, spin, or wishful thinking, yes, facts based on history, tell a different story, with no wiggle room to deny the facts. Here we go. My updated article, which originally appeared in the New York City Daily News on October 14, 2020, is titled, "Who's Likelier to Take Your Guns Away? An Authoritarian Regime." Gun ownership and support of the Second Amendment are not exclusively Republican. That's the first line in my article, and it continues, in 2018, 60% of Democrats owned at least one gun, and 28% lived in a gun household, reports Statistica. The right to own guns is also backed by the growing number of Democratic gun clubs. For example, the Liberal Gun Club forthrightly states its mission, quote, to provide a pro-Second Amendment voice for left-of-center gun owners in the national conversation on firearms, end quote. The club has 30 chapters in 34 states. Pink Pistols, LGBT gun owners, also champion the right to gun ownership, and has chapters in at least 23 states, with multiple chapters in several states. In the 2018 midterm election, 82% of LGBT voters cast their vote for Democratic candidates. But Trump followers and far-right conspiracy theorists have been so intensely focused on promoting the fear-mongering lie that Democrats will take away all their guns, when in fact no serious Democratic candidate has ever made such a proposal. Rather, every candidate has proposed only sensible reforms. The real threat to gun ownership that looms is America's dangerous shift toward authoritarianism. Indeed, history tells us that it's far-right and other authoritarian regimes, not liberal democratic ones, which are most likely to take guns away from ordinary citizens. Let's look at the facts. In every authoritarian takeover in modern history, restrictive gun ownership laws and regulations were introduced, often with severe penalties for violators. The Spartan Training Group, a special forces veteran-owned business dedicated to, quote, providing Maryland citizens with opportunities to exercise their Second Amendment rights safely and legally, end quote, notes that, quote, the most dangerous governments and despots in the last 150 years limited gun ownership and in some cases confiscated firearms from their citizens. In his article, A Brief History of Repressive Regimes and Their Gun Laws, journalist Jose Nino documents that gun confiscation holds a special place in the halls of political repression. He points out that at the beginning of the Communist Revolution in 1917, Vladimir Lenin proposed an armed people's militia. When he gained authoritarian control in 1918, the policy did an about-face. The Council of People's Commissar not only disarmed the populace, but violators also faced up to 10 years imprisonment. In Nazi Germany, if you were not a registered Nazi Party member or other authorized gun carrier and were found with a gun, you could be shot on the spot. Constitutional attorney Stephen Halbrook adds that, quote, disarming political opponents was a categorical imperative of the Nazi regime. Fidel Castro gunned his way into power, but once he was in authoritarian control, he took guns away from the people, says a CIA document. And the Associated Press reported in 2010 that Cuban agents went door to door of those who had sought gun licenses to, quote, encourage them to turn over their firearms, end quote. In Vladimir Putin's authoritarian-ruled Russia, applicants for a gun license must submit to a psychiatric exam. Additionally, the license has to be renewed every 5 years. The applicant must attend a 6.5-hour government-run training session and must also pass a written test. The owner is also required to register the gun with the police, and police will visit the homes of gun owners once a year to verify safe storage. Mental illness or treatment for substance abuse disqualifies a person for gun ownership. American gun owners love the AR-15, the most popular semi-automatic assault rifle in the United States. It can fire 45 to 60 rounds per minute. In Russia, you can't own a gun that stores more than 10 cartridges in the magazine. What about citizen gun ownership in fascist North Korea? Their Firearms Control Act declares, quote, institutions, businesses, groups, and the public are prohibited from possessing or transacting firearms, end quote. Violators are subject to, quote, stern consequences, end quote. In North Korea, stern usually translates as fatal. China is another example of an authoritarian regime that used armed force to gain power, but now has one of the strictest gun laws in the world. Private gun ownership is banned throughout the country. In 2019, the Hong Kong-based South Korea Morning Post reported that the Chinese ban on private ownership is so strict that even if you are caught with a non-lethal gun such as an air gun, you are likely to get prison time. That's what happened to 51-year-old Chow Chun-hei. He was sentenced to 3.5 years for possession of 9 air rifles, which he used for shooting at balloons at his funfair stall for tourists. Singapore, a democratic parliamentary government with authoritarian leanings, has been ruled with an iron hand by the same People's Action Party, PAP, for 5 decades. In the latest rankings of the Democracy Index, Singapore was designated a, quote, flawed democracy. Singaporean journalist Kristen Han points to search and seize raids without warrants, interrogations without lawyers, swiftly jamming through legislation because of one-party domination, limitations on freedom of the press, allowing defamation lawsuits that suppress freedom of speech, and more. USA Today reported in 2019 that Singapore's gun laws are restrictive and punishing. All firearms are forbidden for ordinary citizens who, if caught, are physically beaten by caning, and use a firearm while committing a crime draws a mandatory death sentence, even if no one was killed or injured. Surely authoritarian regimes would not allow an organization like the NRA that favors laissez-faire gun ownership. An alarming number of Americans seem to be craving authoritarianism, judging by their enthusiastic approval displayed at Trump rallies and other public events. Backing up that conclusion, 4 national surveys reported in Politico show that roughly 40% of Americans tend to favor authority, obedience, and uniformity over freedom, independence, and diversity. If authoritarian rule ever comes to America, we may have barely dodged it in the last presidential election, it would be wise for gun owners to look for places to hide their weapons. Now, many people will not like the facts that I stated. If you don't like them, please say why and be specific. Can you cite other facts that challenge what I presented? Or can you offer a convincing argument that some present or future authoritarian regimes would differ concerning citizens owning guns? And again, please be specific. The fact that you don't like something will not make it go away. Facts are real, and they count. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Bernard Starr.